Take my love, take my land, take me where I cannot stand. I don't care, I'm still free. You can't take the sky from me. Hello out there, and if that intro didn't make any sense to you guys, let me explain. Today we are talking about the CRKT Inara, and I got hooked on this knife, drawn to this knife, let's say, because of the name. When CRKT announced all of their new models for 2020, I saw the name Inara and immediately wanted to pick it up. And even if the design hadn't been one I was interested in, I probably still would have picked it up because Inara is the name of a character from the best show ever made for television, Firefly. And if you do not agree with that sentiment, let me know in the comments down below why you are wrong. Firefly was the greatest. Inara was a very cool character, beautiful character, and funny character as well on that show. So yeah, I just immediately had interest in this knife. And guys, I've waited this long to post a video about this knife, and mostly because I really just don't like it. I just don't like it that much. It's grown on me a little bit, but the initial impression and the initial time I had with it just wasn't good. And so we're going to get into all that. Also, throughout the video, I'll be holding the knife up like this just because of the way that it sits. You know, it looks silly. So yeah. So I'll be holding it up. If I put it on a stand, it'd be like that. So anyway, this is the Inara, a new for 2020 design. I got this in the same package of knives that I got the TJ Schwartz Thero, the Tuna, and also the Pete, all at the same time. And of those four knives, you know, it just really was obviously the least of the four. Even though I didn't love the Tuna, this knife just, it didn't jump out at me as impressive. You know, I had that draw to it because of the name. I also have this Spyderco Des Horn, which is another similarly like light knife with similar lines through it that, you know, has that symmetry. And I thought, okay, yeah, well, it's another thing like that. I really love the Des Horn. Let's give the Inara a shot. It's a Richard Rogers design, and I don't know, guys, it just has not been all that impressive. The most impressive aspect of it is the weight being at 1.84 ounces. You know, take a look at that Des Horn, by the way, 1.94. Super cool old Spyderco, but one day I'll do like a full video on that. But yeah, 1.84 ounces, so it's a gent piece. It's sort of a letter opener kind of style, and I don't see it as much more than that. And there are some components of it that are really good, and as we go through everything in the video, you might think to yourself, like, all right, JT keeps saying he likes this and he likes that and he likes this. Like, there aren't that many negative details, but at the end of the day, it just still folds itself into a total package that I just don't love. And I waited and waited to post this, and I was so glad that I did, because I just recently posted a video about the CJRB Rhea, and these two knives are extremely similar. Similar in the way that they open, similar in some of the characteristics as far as like the thumb studs and what they're doing and who they're for, being like righty friendly only and having like incredible action. You know, both of these knives have that, and it was just night and day to me when I got the CJRB versus the Inara. That if the Inara was one that struck me the way the CJRB did, for less money, by the way, I would have been raving about it and would have posted a video about it long ago. All right, so now let's get into it. Let's talk about some of the size comparisons and some of those details and some of the things that I just like about the knife and then really didn't. The first size comparison, and the most important one, is the CRKT Pete. Because when we're doing comparisons, I always like to start with knives, you know, from the same company if I can, and from the same year as well. Because at the end of the day, when we talk about value, I can't think of a single reason to get this over this. So we will definitely come back to the Pete. We have to bring in a mini grip because that's what we do here. We do mini grips and we do PM2 comparisons. So you can see, I mean, the size of the Inara is comparable to the mini grip. It's almost in length identical. You know, so there's a big difference in like the height, there's a big difference in the width, there's a big difference in the weight. So there's a big difference in like the philosophy and application here, sure. But the size, the length is pretty much right on point. Here is the PM2, which I am contracted to have to put that in every single video size comparison. Not true, but it feels that way. All right, so back to the Inara. It's super light, it's super thin, very pocket friendly, very gent piece-esque, right? So what wasn't I impressed with? Well, aesthetically, it had nothing to do with that. I like the look of the knife. The G10 scale looks good. The lines look good. This blade shape, which is sort of like Wharncliffe-y, almost, I don't know, it's a Wharncliffe, yeah. It looks good. It's also very, very signature Richard Rogers. And so I like to see that anytime, especially on like a production knife, a CRKT or a Kershaw, when it feels and looks like the designer's identity. You really get that identity. So that's pretty cool. My biggest problem with this knife out of box, and the biggest reason for it bothering me the way that it did, is just the fact that it wasn't sharp and it wasn't easy to get sharp. So whatever the issue was with I mean, this is a hollow grind, but it doesn't feel like a very drastic hollow grind the way that you see a lot of knives with hollow grinds like look. You know, a lot of times you can see that curvature. This is very slight. It's listed as a hollow grind, and honestly, I sort of have to take them for their word, because in most cases, yeah, I can feel it a little bit, but it doesn't seem to come to like the thinnest edge that you would hope it does. And the thing is, like, it cuts through paper pretty well because it is relatively thin, but it never has been as screaming sharp as it should be. And I had to put a lot of time into it to get it to where it is now versus where it was out of box. So, you know, it just wasn't the cleanest job from the factory. And that's one of those things that can just like give you a bad impression and keep you from really latching onto something. And when I had 3 other knives that came in the same package as this, you know, this is the one that got left by the wayside, and it was a lot of the reason was because of that. Is it functional at this point, you know, for just basic EDC tasks? Absolutely, it sure is, you know, and it's a lot better now. But it also is not one that that is particularly good for any kind of boxes or breaking down things for any type, you know. And you would think with a blade length that is, you know, a little bit longer than maybe some gents pieces, if you know, put it next to this, right, you would think that it'd be a better knife to apply to some of those tasks, and it just isn't. You know, if I were breaking down boxes for an hour, I'd go with the Pete in a heartbeat over the Inara, just because of the way that I know that it performs versus this. This is really just a relegated, in my mind, at least EDC tasks, something to keep on the desk, open letters and packages, and that's really about it. As we move on back, the G10 scale is nice. The ergos on this knife are pretty darn good. There's no hot spots, so I really do like that. So yeah, it's pretty comfortable, again, for what it is. If this was a knife that I had any belief was gonna perform for a long period of time, I would say jimping and this and that, but like it isn't. So, you know, for what it is and for what the design is, it actually works. As we continue to move on back, actually we're gonna flip, take a look at this frame lock. I do like the frame lock. So you can see the lockup is, you know, it's not an early lockup by any stretch of the imagination, but the lock bar and the frame is thick to the point where it's almost as thick as the entire like width of the knife. And so it's secure in a way that is very comforting to me. So I do like that, and it does lock up very well, and so that execution is spot on. As we continue to go towards the back, here we have this really nice finish on the frame. Big fan of it. CRKT has used this, and they continue to like get this black wash looking better and better. So kudos to them there. The clip is a one position, not reversible clip. I'm not sure how they could have reversed it, except maybe like send you a second clip and have this screw be like an interchangeable one. You know what I mean? And like have another clip. I don't know. They could have done that. They didn't. But it's sort of the same thing that I talked about with the Rhea, where, you know, you have this thumb stud that can't protrude to the opposite side, so it's not going to be necessarily meant to be opened left-handed. So is there really that big of a need to be able to flip the clip? no, it's really a right-handed person's knife. Or, I mean, gents piece, super light. I can really see people just taking the darn clip off and carrying it in their pocket loose. You know, coat pocket, back pocket sort of thing. That seems to make a lot of sense to me as well. All right, so the clip, it works just fine, but again, there are some options there. The action is the other thing that at first rubbed me the wrong way. I was excited about it because it's on IKBS, and I thought, okay, so looking at this year's line, I didn't see the Inara as being like this flagship knife that would sell a bunch of units. I looked at the Tuna, I looked at the Overland, I looked at the Thero, I looked at this guy right here, the Pete. There were a number of things from CRKT that I thought, all right, these are going to be like the big sellers. And those didn't have IKBS, but the Inara gets it. All right, so the knife is stupidly smooth. But the problem was, out of box, the detent was ridiculous. And I mean, it was to the point where it was like really hard to break. And it was just because the internals just weren't as clean and lubricated, and it wasn't dialed in a way where it was easy to open. So this was a very difficult knife to open over and over again. And the thumb stud actually, here, let's take a look at the thumb stud. It's pretty cool. Pretty cool little thumb stud. But it was one of those things that was just like wearing on my finger. You know, having to open it over and over again, or just fiddling with it, it just wasn't comfortable. You can spider flick it now. I disassembled it and lubricated it, cleaned it up, and now it's way, way better. Way more drop shutty than it was out of box too. And so, I mean, the action is spot on. And this is a knife now that if I unbox this knife today, maybe my impression of it would be completely different. And maybe it'd be a different, more positive kind of review. As it is, you know, I just had a bad first experience with it just for those two basic reasons, that it wasn't particularly sharp and it wasn't easy to get sharp. And also just the detent just being super stiff. So, I don't know, at this point, like, my expectations for the knife weren't for it to be anything fantastic and all-purpose. And then when it just let me down, I guess, for the small expectations that I had for it, that was even worse. So again, you might be watching this thinking, man, the action is sweet, it's dialed in. The action is sweet, it's dialed in, like, it's a small, comfortable, like, gents carry. I love this thing. I think it's a home run. You might be watching that, and if I conveyed enough information for you to make that decision, then I've done my job here. You know, regardless of what my opinion is, you know, your opinion is the one that really matters when it comes to you getting the knife. And maybe, you know, maybe I've sold you on it. And, you know, my experience doesn't have to be everybody's. And at the end of the day, you know, it isn't a bad knife. It just really wasn't the one for me at the beginning. And while I have warmed up to it a little bit, it still, you know, isn't really the one for me. The one for me is right here. So if we're talking about this kind of knife, the lightweight EDC versatile gents piece kind of deal, the Rhea, which I posted a video about a few days ago, is the one. And yeah, I mean, price point, definitely $40 plus for the Inara and $30 something for the CJRB. For me, it's a sort of a no-brainer. But one quick thing that I forgot that I wanted to say and just realized as I was editing this video also speaks to the detriment of this knife in comparison to other things in terms of value. And when it comes to value, I really like to stay within the company first. You know, it's really cool to do those like comparison videos and talk about like Benchmade this versus Spyderco that or whatever. But when it comes to a company, like if I'm going to buy the Inara, I need to know why it's better than the other knives that you are producing and putting out. And I really like to focus on the same year stuff. You know, if you release the Inara this year, 2020, and you also release something like the Pete, like why am I getting the Inara and not the Pete? Obviously, if you're CRKT, you'd want me to get both. And well, you were successful with me because I did get both. But if I'm just a regular type of user, why am I going to choose a knife like this over a knife like this that for me is just far superior, even though the materials maybe might not be quite as good. But why would I pick the Inara over the Pete at a price point that is higher than the Pete? I cannot understand that, you know, and if you just really like the design and, you know, the slimmer kind of, you know, maybe more streamlined look, I can understand that. But for me, the Pete is just a far superior knife, and one that is a lot more usable. And so, yeah, it just makes the Inara pale even further in comparison when you have another knife from the same company at a cheaper price point that's better. You know, so it'll do all the same things as the Inara, but it's just a better knife in my opinion. So yeah, definitely wanted to share that with you when it came to value. I mean, this one definitely does have its merits. So it's up to you guys, and that's just my take on it. So any questions, comments, complaints, suggestions, let me know. What are your thoughts, and what are the things, is as small and nitpicky as they are, that when you unbox a knife, they just might tell you that they might just tell you you're done with it, you know, and make it really hard for you to come back to and reevaluate. Because while I can say that this is a better knife than I originally thought it was, it's never going to be one that I am 100% sold on. And yeah, that's just the way it is. All right, guys, thanks for watching. Have a good one. I appreciate it. Take care.